Salmon are important to all of us in Washington. They matter socially, they matter culturally, and they matter economically. Salmon are big business. Washington's commercial and recreational fisheries support approximately 16,000 jobs and $540 million in personal income each year. Communities depend on jobs and purchases that come from salmon fisheries, and our state's economy suffers when fish populations suffer. But our ties to salmon are much deeper than that. We eat salmon at the family table and we serve it to our guests on special occasions. We take our kids fishing as a rite of passage or a fun family activity. And our communities come together to celebrate salmon when salmon return. There's a reason we call salmon an icon in Washington, and their future is entirely up to us.
From the Pacific Ocean coast to your ears, this is The Outdoor Line on 710 ESPN Seattle.
Welcome back to The Outdoor Line. I'm Tom Nelson. That's John Martinez. Matt Nelson behind the glass. 866-979-3776. Locally, 206-421-3776. That's Reverse Chine Hotline, brought to you by Wildcraft and Master Marine. You know, so here's the thing. You look at the 7 western states in the United States, okay? Washington is the smallest geographically, and yet we're second in population, only to California. So we have so many people, Danny, wanting so much real estate for work and living and recreation, and so there's an extremely high demand placed on it, and that really highlights the need to make exceptional land use practices choices, and we're not, and right now we're not doing it. And you shared with me a number that I thought was just astounding, that there's 40,000 individual anadromous barriers. And let's get this straight.
Yeah.
With culverts or places that salmon cannot access habitat, there's 40,000 of these been identified in the state of Washington. And let's just say each one of those takes 2 miles of spawning habitat, which is a very conservative figure, okay?
Right.
You're looking at almost 100,000 miles of spawning habitat denied to the naturally spawning populations. If you are serious about salmon rehabilitation, you got to let them repatriate this habitat. The only way to do that is through culvert removal, and the only way to get that done is public education, and that's, I think, what you're trying to accomplish with your film.
So this is Ebright Creek in the city of Sammamish in King County, and Ebright Creek is one of the most productive streams that we have for kokanee, and is a real cornerstone of our restoration efforts for the population. And we're on the land of Wally Pereira, a private landowner. We had a culvert here that he inherited from a prior landowner that was about an 18-inch diameter culvert that was a 100% barrier to kokanee passage upstream to what is likely to be the best remaining spawning habitat for kokanee in the watershed. And what he did in this project was he replaced a culvert that was a barrier to kokanee passage for 5 or 6 decades with a culvert that now allows passage upstream. Historically, kokanee spawned in many creeks around the Lake's Washington watershed. Today, they only spawn in 3 creeks that are tributaries to Lake Sammamish, and Ebright Creek is consistently the most productive kokanee spawning creek that we have. The habitat that we see here is probably the best spawning habitat for kokanee today, and it's only opened up for kokanee access by virtue of the project that Wally Pereira did on his property downstream of here to replace an undersized culvert and restore access for kokanee to this portion of the stream. We feel that that project has really created the cornerstone of our entire recovery effort because we're getting productivity out of this great habitat.
Being part of the forest industry and being a forester, we take a long-term approach to everything we do, including managing our roads. And The best thing we can do for our roads over the long term is make sure that no sediment gets into the streams from our roads, and that any stream that crosses under our roads is accessible for fish passage. We started out inventorying all our roads and identifying where we had fish blockages and where we had issues keeping ditch water out of streams. Since the year 2000, the industry has accomplished a lot for road maintenance and removal of barriers. We've opened up over 4,000 miles of fish habitat that was blocked before, and we've removed close to 5,000 barriers.
So we're out here in Snohomish County today looking at fish passage barriers during a rainstorm. This rainstorm's caused the coho to start moving upstream. It's the fall. This is when they migrate for spawning. We've got a spillway here that's entirely impassable to fish. We've been watching the coho jumping up and getting thrown back down. And then just around the corner here, we've got a fishway that provides at least partial passage. Now that fishway may not meet our current criteria, so it doesn't pass all the fish, but it passes some percentage of them. So we're now standing at another tributary to the Little Pilchuck Creek. It's quite a big stream. It's probably about a 21-foot bankful width, and it's trying to fit itself through two small double-barrel 2-foot culverts. A lot of issues are associated with these undersized pipes. First thing is it's a partial barrier, and there are thousands of these across the landscape in our region and about 40,000 across the state of Washington. Because of that constriction and that small little opening they're trying to get all this water through, really speeds up the water inside the pipes, which is that velocity barrier for the fish traveling upstream, especially juveniles. And then also the landowner was just here and he was telling us that during the winter floods there's at least 1 or 2 feet of water over this roadway washing downstream, and so that fine sediment travels downstream and smothers eggs and redds.
Well, Washington's 39 counties have been working with a variety of watershed restoration groups, salmon recovery groups, tribes, conservation organizations, Department of Fish and Wildlife, to identify the culverts and barriers to fish passage on our 40,000 miles of roads. So one of the things that we have been working hard on is replacing those culverts that are highest priority, where industrial forest landowners and small forest landowners have already done good work to open up habitat for rearing and spawning, but there's a fish passage barrier on a county road. So opening up that type of barrier to already thousands and thousands of miles of streams and rivers is one of the things that we've been working on already.
Okay, so here we are at Harkins Creek, again in Snohomish County. It's another example of a culvert that doesn't meet our fish passage criteria. This culvert is what we call perched, so the invert or the bottom of the culvert is above the stream bed elevation. So fish have to jump up almost a couple feet to get into this culvert, and once they get in there, the velocity inside that culvert is so high because it's undersized that they just get blown back out. So they have a heck of a time trying to get in there. It is the worst of the worst. These perch culverts are typically 100% impassable to salmon.
The greatest challenge we are facing is how are we going to pay for the thousands of culverts that need replacing. We have limited amount of resources at the county level to address this. We've been working with the legislature, identifying this as a need for funding, and we definitely will continue to ask the legislature to provide the resources so that counties can do its part in salmon recovery.
So here I am in Mitchell Creek. It's a salmon-bearing stream that flows to Lake Stevens within the city of Lake Stevens, and I'm surrounded by spawning kokanee salmon. And the reason this stream is so productive is because there's no fish passage barriers from here to the lake. And the problem is we have too few of these streams in Washington state. We need more streams where there's not barrier culverts that limit fish from getting up into spawning gravels.
Salmon are a vital part of our history, our culture, and our economy here in Washington. The challenges facing them are accelerating, but we know how to help them. Salmon have shown us their resilience, they've shown us their persistence. We've even seen salmon recolonize a stream immediately after taking out a barrier, almost as if they're waiting for us to open the door for them. They're ours to save, and it starts by making way for salmon.